So, hello everyone, welcome. My name is Frances Sadi. I am the Associate Director of Non-Degree Programs here at Brown University School of Professional Studies. We are joined today by a community that includes mindfulness teachers and trainees, clinicians and caregivers, educators, researchers, as well as many people who are here not as professionals, but are here as just human beings navigating various struggles with illness, aging, grief, uncertainty, and profound global change. What stood out to me in some of the questions that many of you shared ahead of time was today's session is really not just the diversity that's being represented here in this community, but also the sense of shared experience, a collective grappling with how to stay present, compassionate, and connected when is feeling fragile or overwhelming. So, wherever you are coming from today and whatever you're carrying with you, we want you to know that you're welcome here. So, for those of you joining us for the first time, the Evolution of Mindfulness Speaker Series explores how mindfulness continues to grow and change over time, how practices rooted in contemplative wisdom are being studied, refined, and brought into new contexts shaped by science, systems, and the realities of modern life. So, across the series, we're especially interested in questions of continuity and change, asking questions such as what are the things that need to evolve and what needs to be protected, as well as how might mindfulness as a practice best serve humanity in moments of personal and global transition, uncertainty, and unrest. So, here at Brown University School of Professional Studies, our mission is to serve adult learners and professionals through programming that is both rigorous and practical. Learning that is grounded in evidence, responsive to lived experience, and oriented towards meaningful impact in the world. Our mindfulness offerings are developed in close partnership with the Mindfulness Center at Brown University's School of Public Health. And together we aim to steward contemplative practices with integrity, honoring their roots while supporting careful research, thoughtful adaptation, and real world application. Our shared goal is to support individual well being, professional growth, and a broader movement towards collective care. So today's session is titled Living Wisely, Loving Fully, a conversation with Susan Bauer-Wu. This conversation invites us to reflect on what it means to live well, not when life is tidy or predictable, but when we face uncertainty, illness, aging, loss, social and political unrest, as well as profound global challenges such as climate crisis. Many of us are discovering that mindfulness is not only about stress reduction or performance enhancement, it is about learning how to stay present with what is difficult and how to meet vulnerability with compassion and how to remain connected to what matters most when we might otherwise turn away. And our guest today, Susan Bauer-Wu, brings a rare and deeply integrated perspective to this inquiry. Across decades of work as a nurse, researcher, and educator, as well as contemplative leader, she has helped shape the field of mindfulness from its early clinical research roots to its current intersections with healthcare, end of life care, ethics, and global climate awareness. Susan's work consistently returns to a simple but profound question: how do we live fully, even and especially when life is fragile? So, more formally, to introduce Susan, Susan Bauer-Wu is an author, researcher, and former president of the Mind and Life Institute. She was an early investigator of mindfulness-based interventions and one of the first researchers to receive an NIH R01 grant for a mindfulness clinical trial. She's the author of Leaves Falling Gently, as well as A Future We Can Love, and her work continues to explore how mindfulness, compassion, and connection can guide us through illness, aging, and ecological crisis. And Susan is joined in conversation today by Dr. Eric Laux, who's the director of the Mindfulness Center at Brown University's School of Professional Studies, and a professor of epidemiology, behavioral and social sciences, and medicine. And as he's done in the past, Eric will be guiding today's conversation. So as we begin, I invite you, if it feels right, just to take a brief moment to arrive, perhaps noticing your breath and your sensation of sitting where you are as we step into a conversation about presence, care, and what it means to live wisely. If questions arise as you're listening, We really welcome you to share them using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll reserve the chat if we can, not for questions, but for engagement as you're doing now. Thank you. And we will try to weave in as many of your questions as we can in towards the end. Just a quick note that today's session is being recorded, and we will send out a follow-up email in the next couple of days with a link to the recording on our YouTube playlist. And with that, it is my pleasure to turn things over to Eric and to Susan. Susan, Eric, thank you so much for being with us here today. And thank you for everyone in the audience who's taken time out of your day to join. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, wonderful to spend some time with you, Susan, and for us to be with the broader community as well, over or close to 400 people here now live. And I think in some ways it feels like I've been spending the last few weeks with you as I've been enjoying your latest book, The Leaves Falling Gently, and just really appreciate the care that you have done as a nurse and as a researcher to really connect in with people with serious illness and to meet them where they're at, as well as their caregivers, and provide resources for them to live as fully as possible during those times of life. So really appreciate the work that you do, and look forward to offering some questions, many from the audience. We've had some wonderful questions submitted ahead of time that I'll be drawing off of, as well as what comes up live as well. So really thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. And thank you, Fran. I'm really honored to be here. Um, I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, impressed with the work that you're all doing, and just looking forward to being here. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah. So we typically start off each of these sessions with a familiar question for each of our speakers, which is what first led you to mindfulness, if you would be up for sharing that.
So what led me to a formal mindfulness practice? I'll begin with that because I think was naturally inclined to be a kid that was curious. I think all kids are, and to be mindful. But my formal practice began. I was around 30, and as many of us, the entree is usually some darker period of our lives that we feel like we can need a little bit of help. And so for me, I was around 30, and I was at that time a full-time graduate student moving to a new city. And it was kind of a perfect storm in my life. I had coming out of a difficult early marriage, grieving the death of my mother. And I didn't have a lot of money. And I moved to the new city, which was Chicago, in January. So it was, and I didn't know anybody. And it was pre-internet. And so I was flipping through one of those free newspapers that most cities have. And there was an ad, and it said, "Feeling stressed? Question mark. Learn to meditate." And it just happened to be at this Korean Zen temple, the Zen Buddhist Temple of Compassionate Wisdom. It was on the next street from where I was living, and it didn't cost much money. It was like, okay, I'm going to go. And it was truly the moment I walked in and started the first couple of weeks of this 6-week or 8-week class, I realized there's something to this because I'm starting to feel better. So that was, what led me to mindfulness. That was the beginning, and it really did stick because after I finished graduate school and I did a postdoc in behavioral medicine and psycho-oncology, my first full-time faculty position just happened to be coincidentally at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, where the original Center for Mindfulness was, and had a joint appointment in preventive behavioral medicine in the Graduate School of Nursing. So that's a little bit of how I came to it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, interesting path, and some good luck in some ways, some bad luck in some ways, and some good luck in some ways landing at UMass, for example, too.
Yeah.
I saw some comments. My voice was a little low. Let me know if that's still an issue. I turn my input volume up if anyone's having trouble hearing me now. And so you've done some meaningful work supporting people living with serious illness, and I'm curious what first drew you to focus on serious illness in your career, and also what's kept you engaged with this work over time. I find some folks can ask a research question, then kind of move on to other topics, but it feels like you really stayed with that one, and it's allowed a real deepening of the contributions that you've been able to make. And so, what drew you to that, if you wouldn't mind sharing, and how'd you continue with it too?
Well, I started my first degree was in nursing, and even though it's been a long time since I've been a formal beds quote unquote bedside nurse, if you will, I feel like I'm, once a nurse, always a nurse kind of
Mm,
thing. So I began my career path that way. My mother was a nurse, and then when I was 17, my mother was diagnosed with a serious cancer,
mm,
and when I was 23, she died.
wow.
So that has had a profound impact on me for sure. And what I learned through my professional work as a nurse and through my own journey with my mom is that serious illness affects every aspect of one's being, really. So there's a physical component and all the symptoms that can be associated with it. And psychologically, there's just your world is really shattered. There's so much uncertainty and um, existentially, am I going to die? What's my life all about? Um, and then there's role changes that happen. And so there's just like it affects every aspect of who we are. And so to me, it's like there's endless possibilities and doorways of helping people to, live better. And I have seen and witnessed how contemplative practices can make a difference with people with serious illness. There's no, end to it. And so, as it relates to, if we think about, at the core of the mindfulness teachings, a lot of it is working with our minds and how our minds carry us away from feeling, feeling okay right here, right now. And so, what is it? Like we have these thoughts about the past and these thoughts about the future. So with serious illness, it's like it's exponential how these thoughts just get larger of thinking, oh no, did I cause the illness? What did I do? There's regrets, there's shame, regrets of things done, things left undone. And then there's the worry about the future of, am I going to run out of time? Um, is this is the treatment going to work? Am I going to get better? How am I going to die? Is my family going to be okay? It's just like it's on kind of ongoing.
Yeah.
And so with serious illness, to me, it's like, okay, this is the big experiment of working with these mindfulness practices of how we can come back to present moment experience and not be totally hijacked by our thoughts of the past and future. So, and then I'll also say that I have found it profoundly rewarding working with people directly with serious illness. So it's not just from an academic sense in my academic work, but it's just keeping it, to me, um, relationships get really real when we're facing those hardships. And that's the juice that keeps me going is those authentic
Mm,
connections and relationships.
yeah, it's powerful. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of directions we could go from that. Uh, I think one thing I'm curious, but like, were you living at home when your mom had the diagnosis, the cancer diagnosis? Were you still living at home at that point, or had you moved out?
No, I was, an adult living on my own. I
On
was
your
working
own.
as a nurse.
Yeah.
At the time. I
Okay.
started out in patient oncology and then went to psychiatry, inpatient
Yeah.
psychiatry
Okay.
during that time. And it was pre-hospice. And so I was involved in some early hospice work, getting a hospice going in the community where I lived. But at that time, this was the early 80s.
Yeah.
But my brother, father, and I took care of my mom at home, and she did die at home.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but it was
Uh,
without additional support, any
Yeah.
professionals coming into the house. We did it.
Yeah. Wow. And then did you have a contemplative practice at that point? I know you started learning it in Chicago. I'm not sure how much that overlap was that. Did that illness
It
happen?
was before that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was some years before,
Yeah.
a few years before.
Okay.
No, not a formal. No.
Yeah. And are there elements that you've learned in your contemplative practice now that have supported you in your relationship to to the memory of your mom, or how you saw the family transition then, that now on the backside, after you've had all these decades of experience caregiving and supporting people with chronic illness, as well as the contemplative training that you've had, how does that all that training influence the way that you look back on that first major moment, it sounds like, of relating to chronic illness in a serious way, serious illness?
Yeah. Well, I was young, right? I was in my early
Yeah.
20s and just
Yeah.
doing the best I could.
Yeah.
But I had experienced enough, even though I didn't have a formal contemplative practice, where I realized that being present is really what it comes down to, is how we can be most present with each other.
Yeah.
And if I had to do it, if I like the self of who I am post learning, having a contemplative practice, I'd say is one that's just more grounded and not uh, like grasping to try to make things better. I think at that time, even when my mom was sick and we knew she was dying, we were still like, maybe she's going to get better. Maybe she's going to get better. Let's not give up, kind of thing. And I don't see this idea of giving up as really giving up. Because if we can be present to what is, in a way, with an open heart, um, we actually won't be so distracted with trying to be somewhere other than where we are. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
um,
Thank you. With your book, it centers on like three core themes: mindfulness and compassion and connectedness. This is the more recent book, Release Falling Gently, focus on serious illness. And be curious, like how did you choose those three? Like what feels essential about them, especially in the context of serious illness?
well, I think it's all three are important for all of us, whether or not you are living with serious illness or with a loved one with serious illness. And the way I thought about it and do think about it is that the book is about living fully with serious illness. And when I think about the three key threads of being a whole person and living a good life, to me, all three components are important. And so, mindfulness helps us to appreciate or to live with presence and to, use our senses in such a way that we can um, feel alive. It helps us to work with our thoughts and um, those, realizing that we have some agency with our thoughts. And so the mindfulness section is quite there's a lot going on there, right? But then the compassion section isn't just about compassion, which is the alleviation of suffering. But the section itself brings in loving awareness and loving kindness, gratitude, forgiveness, generosity. And that's about having a clear heart. Like that's like, ooh, we're starting to come alive. So, mindfulness is like creating a fertile ground, planting the seeds. But then compassion is like, the fertilizer, the light, little bit of rain, and then connectedness. It's like to be full human beings, we have to be connected beyond just our physical bodies, but to connected with what gives us meaning, connected with the world around us, connected with relationships, human and non-human, realizing that we can connect beyond talking. In fact, the most profound connections are actually without talking, in my experience. So to me, it's like all three are about what it means to live fully. So it just made sense to me. That's how I came up with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's been working for me too as I read it. And I've been thinking about your role as in the leadership of the Mind and Life Institute, and how it's so well connected to the Dalai Lama, who has such a great emphasis on compassion in his teachings. And I'd be curious to hear a little bit about how the experience of working with Mind and Life like influenced your understanding of compassion, and even any elements that you heard from the Dalai Lama or engaged with him in that regard that sort of still live with you to this day.
No, His Holiness the Dalai Lama really is special, and and I don't know. It's hard to put into words, but I'll try my best to just share my lived experience of being around him. But it's very, very interesting. You meet famous people, we run into people different, or just people that we feel that have some significance, and we may get a little quiver and nervous and and there's something about the moment with His Holiness the first time I met him, and it's happened every time I saw him after that, which was really quite a few times. There's this sense of calm. He just exudes this genuine care and calm and compassion, like seeing him around other people. He is so present to seeing suffering in the room, looking in the eyes of people, looking at their body language. He's just so attuned and compassionate. And it's very easy actually to be around him. It's really easy because you just feel, there's a sense of real relaxation. And he has used this word time and time and time again of warm-heartedness. Warm-heartedness. That sticks with me. The last dialogue that we did when I was with Mind and Life, which was in 2023, he must have said about 50 times the word warm-heartedness. I'm probably exaggerating, but he said it a lot, and he just kept kind of repeating it, and it was like he was like giving us this teaching. Hey, all, you know what? Just like warm-hearted. That's our answer. If all 8 billion of us did that, this world could be a better place. So anyway, those are some takeaways that I have from Holiness. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, curious, since stepping away from your leadership at Mind and Life, how's this chapter been for you, and what's been filling you up lately, professionally or maybe even personally as well, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, well, I think you kind of know the path. I was on a similar path than you, Eric, for a long time. And so, academic positions are full, and then leadership, full-time leadership position are really, really, really quite 24/7 in a way. Even when you're sleeping, there's something that you're integrating in your brain around it. And when I finished with Mind and Life, which was the end of 2023, I just decided I needed to take a break and to not force what was next. That was the big question everybody asked. What are you doing next? What are you doing next? And I was like, you know what? I, I'm very fortunate that I can take a bit of a break, and I'm not gonna force it, and I'm just gonna take care of myself, and I'm going to listen and see what I'm called to do. And so, in some ways, I'm going back to a big part of my work now, which is very part-time, um, is I'm working with people who are facing serious illness or aging issues or caregiving issues, and also maybe actively preparing for the end of their life. So I've been doing some end of life doula work as a volunteer, but I also have my own professional practice, and it's really rewarding. I just am appreciating um, the relationships and feeling like I'm making a difference in a smaller way, but the ripples are significant. Uh, and and I'm also enjoying consulting and just with organizations and with people who are values aligned. And so doing a lot of hiking, time with my dog, time with my family.
Yeah, nice. Think of that section in your book that talks about Gregory Kramer's work, Insight Dialogue, where there's like those 4 steps, where first we pause and then take a moment to relax and then open towards and then trust emergence was the
Yeah,
last. And it feels like, I've been like actually playing around with that the last couple of days after reading that in your book, and
yeah,
almost feels like you're doing that now with your career of just pausing and opening towards all the folks that you've served over the years and what's fresh for them now, and then trusting emergence, and what comes
mhm,
forward. And I
yeah,
respect that. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm going to pull some questions forward from folks. It's almost like there's all your work with climate uh, change that I'm happy to address as well. And then the work like with serious illness. And with the serious illness, there's sort of the folks going through the illness themselves, as well as the caregivers. And I think we have a lot of caregivers joining us today, just seeing the flavors of the questions that have been coming forward. And so uh, we've had a question, for example, from Tina, who shares, as a retired nurse, I'm navigating end of life issues with my husband's condition. Another participant asked, how do we develop meaningful connections after a period of isolation due to being a solo in-home caregiver? And thirdly, related, these are all kind of related, just to let you navigate how best to respond. Someone shared, Susan, what guidance would you offer to caregivers about tending to their own well-being, especially when they feel exhausted, isolated, or overwhelmed, both for themselves and for the people they care for? So those are some of the themes of questions coming up from a caregiver perspective that I suspect folks would appreciate your wisdom about.
yeah. Well, there are a lot of family caregivers in this country, right? The population's aging, and there's estimated 63 million plus family caregivers in this country. I think that's a low number, actually. And that number has increased by more than 50% over the last 10 years. So there's a lot. And people who are family caregivers are struggling to not only take care of their loved ones and to grieve the changes that they're experiencing through the illness, and preparing for them to, after they may die from the illness, they're juggling, just getting through the day, um, putting food on the table, working. A lot of them are working. A lot of people are sandwich generation when you have younger family members to take care of. So yeah, we know it. It's a lot, and um, caregiving stress is also associated with a lot of chronic illness and serious illness as well. And so then the caregivers become patients in a way. So it is a very, very under resourced population in this country. Actually all over, I think in modern societies all over the world, but I think we are not doing it very well here in the United States. So what can they do? What can they do? Particularly if they don't have a lot of resources. So if you don't have a lot of resources, hopefully you may have other kinds of resources in your life that are relational resources. And so many caregivers think they have to do it themselves, and there's nobody who can help them. And sometimes that is the case. I really recognize sometimes that is the case. But oftentimes there are caring people in the network, maybe they're neighbors, maybe they're coworkers, maybe they're family or extended family who want to help, but the caregivers resist accepting the help. And there's actually a chapter in the book about asking for and accepting help because it's such an issue. Because our society really values independence and being able to say, I'm strong, I can do this, I don't need help, or I know what's best for my loved one and nobody else can help them, or you know. And the bottom line is it's going to take a toll on your well-being. And so you absolutely can benefit from not trying to tough it out all alone as best you can. So asking for and accepting help. And in that process, taking time to take care of yourself. And even as it relates to the work that you're all doing with the Center for Mindfulness is the practices, taking a few moments. Maybe you don't have the time to take a full-on MBSR course because that's just really not really possible. But maybe you can sprinkle some practices throughout your day. And no matter what you're doing, you can begin to just ground and to slow down. Take a few slow, deep breaths, tune into your body, go outside, feel the air on your face, feel the sun on your face, just for a minute. You can't underestimate these little micro moments of mindfulness and how they can be beneficial. So it's not easy. The reality of caregiving, particularly with serious chronic illness like dementia, for example, is that it goes on for years and years and years. And the end in sight's not anytime soon. And it doesn't necessarily, the disease itself and the circumstances don't get easier, but hopefully you can learn skills and tap into resources that can make it easier or as easy as possible.
Yeah, well, thank you. Lots of good nuggets in there. And I'm also seeing some questions arise around your role, like with climate change, and Erica asked, how can we remain open-hearted without becoming overwhelmed by social, political, and global crises? How do you personally define resilience in the face of collective suffering, and what role does compassion play in sustaining hope in light of how the world currently is? And how do we balance awareness of suffering with the capacity to feel joy and gratitude? And someone else shared, how can we sustain our efforts and persevere when we face so many obstacles in our efforts to work on climate issues? How can we cultivate hardness and grit and resilience? So there's some themes
Oh,
of those societal issues that are arising right now that I think folks would love to hear your perspectives on.
a lot there.
Yeah, there is a lot there.
There's a lot there, but it also speaks to, I love these questions because it really speaks to the times that we're in and the suffering that's experienced, individually and collectively. And it's really hard. Um, the first question I recall related to being open-hearted without being overwhelmed. And I think that staying open-hearted is really critical. I think that actually will help us to be more resilient. I think it helps to be more resilient than to be overwhelmed. But to keep it simple, instead of like open-hearted in such a way that you're taking on the suffering of everyone and that it's just too big, keeping open-hearted within your direct spheres of influence and relationships. And that can be sustaining. That can buoy you as you're like feel like you're holding too much. So I would encourage people to not close down, because actually when we close down, that creates more fear and more unsettledness and apathy. And gosh, we don't need people to be, apathetic. It's a, but I realize that it can be a survival skill because sometimes it just feels like it's too much. But we think about what is it that we do have control over beyond our thoughts and our mindsets, which we do, and that's really big. But what else do we have control over? What are the little differences that we can make on just a day-to-day basis, on a moment-to-moment basis? And those small acts will make us feel better. We are maybe helping to make others feel better or doing whatever little bit we can within our community. But, I love Joanna Macy, who's such a bright light and was such a beautiful force of nature until her relatively recent death. And Joanna um, spoke about hope in a way that was like wise hope, active hope, where there's possibility. Like the future's uncertain. The future is uncertain. We could say we're doomed, or we could say, oh, we're going to be fine. And maybe neither of them are true. There's someplace in the middle, right? And so the future's uncertain. Our future, individual future's uncertain, right? But as long as it's uncertain, there's possibility. And if we're curious and we maintain the spirit of wonder in every moment, basic moment to moment experience, but wonder about what new ways, maybe the old ways weren't working and new ways create doorways for possibility. So I think that um, remaining curious, being open to possibilities, realizing that we're in it together. I think one of the things that is can make our world, our individual worlds um, darker and heavier is when we feel alone. We know about the loneliness epidemic, but it really is powerful to be connected, and that
Yeah.
makes a difference.
Yeah, Mick just asked, could Susan speak about what she finds the best way to build and connect with community and feel connected in a world that can seem so alienating, yet we do and must live collectively?
Yeah, I'd say get out into your community, meet your neighbors, pick up trash together, go to community gardens, invite people to your garden to weed together. I'd say, right now it's hard from looking out the window here in Central Virginia, and there's snow and ice on the ground, but it will warm up and we will be out in our gardens again. And one of the best things to do is to get your hands in the soil, and be together in the community. I have found one thing. You asked what I was up to these days, and I've gotten, less time on the computer and less Zoom meetings and more time in my community. I'm, volunteering with community. I'm meeting, people I've never met before and from all walks of life. And it just feels, really good to see that you can make a difference. Because if you just look at the big, huge issues that are happening globally and as it relates to climate change, it could, you know, it could shut us down, or we can, you know, say, okay, what can we do? So I'll just say, keep it simple,
Mm.
get out there, meet others, work together, finish small projects. Have a friend who's actively working on getting rid of invasives in at a local park. It's a little bit that you can make a difference.
Yeah, maybe if we navigate back a bit more towards the serious illness work that you've done. Paul asked, it's hard to help coach someone to practice mindfulness when they're experiencing something you're not. For example, how do I help my brother cope with cancer? It is hard for me to encourage him to be present. I feel guilty and I'm not going through what he is.
Hmm. Good. Thank you, Paul. I think we said Paul said it. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul, yeah.
Um, really appreciate the vulnerability shared in that. We don't know what somebody else is going through, so we can't minimize it. We don't minimize it ever, and don't try to say, I know what you're going through, even if you have had a similar diagnosis, because you don't know. Everybody's experience is very individual. And talk to people who have a mindfulness practice, who want to bring mindfulness to make somebody feel better, and just like do it in a way. And I will say that, um, encourage you not to do that. And the best way to be and to bring your practice to another person is to be really present, and I would even say, don't even use the word mindfulness. And maybe, because it sounds like, Paul, this story that you shared is with your brother, is that he's so, his world is about the symptoms that he's experiencing and whatever's going on in his head, which is a lot of, probably, like I said earlier, worry or regret, or a lot, the whole gamut. And maybe you could say, let's go sit outside, or let's go look out the window, or let's open the window and listen to the birds. Like keeping it really simple and sensory experience, but make it a shared experience. And if you're, doing it together, and that may be able to give him little glimpses and these moments where he actually can feel, okay, or you just being there with him and not trying to make it all, make it all better. Although I do commend you because you do love him. You want to make it better, but not forcing, not trying, just being present and inviting him into mindfulness practices without um, saying that's what you're doing.
Yeah, with mindfulness training, we sometimes like what if someone's has the like really strong emotions that say are like overwhelming, or physical sensations that are overwhelming, you know, may not be the exact best time to engage with mindfulness practices. It might be other things like say distraction or other forms of care.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we had some clinicians offer some questions ahead of time where, with conditions like serious illness, how do we work with like mindfulness when there might be some challenges, say around trauma and dissociation, or difficulty with somatic practices, or the idea of like buying into mindfulness when the body feels unsafe. And so these kinds of themes were asked about, and be curious to hear your reflections on like when and how and if to engage with mindfulness with folks that are really having some challenges with some of those pieces we mentioned.
Yeah. I don't have, to be honest, I don't have a lot of experience with trauma and dissociation and those those experiences. And there is, as you know, there's skill that needs to go into working with people that have that. Those, but I'd say no matter what, it's being really, really um, sensitive to what they may be experiencing, and and noticing if it's something that is making them feel unsafe and unsettled, and if that's beginning to happen, to not go there, I think is
Mm.
one of the most important things.
Yeah.
But some people, question I do get a lot relates to extreme physical symptoms that can be causing distress. And then what do you do with that? Like where does mindfulness come in when someone's feeling, say, a lot of pain?
Mm.
So I think having a foundational mindfulness practice helps you to really discern um, the experience, to understand how much of that experience is um, physical versus the stories that we lay on top of the experience.
Mm.
And uh, when we're in tune with our bodies, we can understand, this is an old familiar. I have felt this before, and it's not that bad. It's maybe a 4 on a 0 to 10 scale. And um, I can work with that and use a mindfulness practice to help me. Or you realize, oh, this is a new pain. This is a really new pain. It's intense. It doesn't feel good. And maybe wise action, the most wise action is to call the doctor, take a nap, take a medication, and not just try to, you know, work with noticing how it changes or noticing the nuances of the experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think you're familiar with David Treleaven's work, where he wrote a book called Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness that's really shifted the field in their
Yes.
awareness of how trauma informs people's experience with mindfulness training and how we can have various adaptations, say not always having the breath as an anchor point for a meditation, to have other anchor points too, like different parts of the body or sound, for example.
Yeah.
And also Willie Britton talks about the value of like many off ramps, that there's many paths to health and happiness, and mindfulness can be one of them. It's maybe not
Yeah.
for everyone, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
if we find that it's not a good fit, there's just non-judgmental off ramps as well, in case another approach is better for that particular person. And so those are some of the ways that I've personally been working with it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for lifting up both David and Willoughby's great work. And absolutely that there are many paths to this, and that and with serious illness, the breath is often can be not a safe place, not comfortable because there's breathing difficulties. And so what are the other pathways in? I actually want to, Eric, kind of related to this, but I wanted to mention somebody who we both knew, just Kathy Kerr.
Mm-hmm.
And Kathy Kerr, for those of you who don't know Kathy was really phenomenal, very special scholar and scientist, and somebody who lived with serious illness for a long time. I think she had a blood cancer for about 20 years. And Kathy embodied curiosity, and her doorway, her practice was really Qigong. It's a big part. She had a lot of practices, but Qigong was one of these, gentle body movements. And I can remember being with Kathy in her backyard in the last months of her life, and her really not well, like physically, and knowing that her disease was getting worse. And yet, feeling so alive with the birds chirping and the springtime breeze, and um, being able to just ground, feel her feet on the ground. And it's like, yeah, yeah, it's like, this is bad, this is hard, and this moment is okay too.
Mm.
Kathy embodied that. And actually, when I think of you, I think she introduced my, somehow I connect you with her and Kathy,
Mm.
um, somebody that I was close to for a long time. We would go back a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah, she was at Brown as well, and one of the core folks that inspired me to get into mindfulness from an academic perspective. It was part of my personal life, but she had a research assistant, Chloe Zimmerman,
Yeah,
who continued her work after she passed, and she'd done this qigong study on chronic fatigue in women that were going through cancer treatment, and had a really skilled qigong instructor like fly out from Seattle actually, and I think he lived in Willoughby's house, like in her upstairs
hmm,
loft, and it was a powerful study. And Chloe actually delayed medical school in order to finish Kathy's work and publish it,
yeah,
and then went on to medical school. And it's sort of an example of how much her work influenced folks, that they would make those kinds of career altering decisions to make sure that the important work that she started got finished too. Yeah. I know we're coming close to the end, and we typically close with a question with this series too. Um, that I lost track of my notes. There it is. So looking ahead to the future, where do you see the study and practice of mindfulness best serving humanity? So I see like a remarkable arc that you've had the time to dedicate to over the career. And as you look ahead to the future now, where do you see the study and practice of mindfulness best serving humanity?
Yeah. Well, if we look at the work of mindfulness, the practice and the study over the last decades, there's been so much that's been focused on individual benefit of reducing stress, reducing pain, anxiety, making us feel better, making individual well-being. And that's like important, that's foundational for us to be whole human beings in the world. But I think that the field is relatively in its infancy as it relates to the actual impact of how mindfulness practices actually influence how people show up in the world, how they relate to others, and how they also relate to the natural world and the decisions that they make and how they're consuming and just the way that we're all the ways that we're living our lives. So I would love to see that the field and even the teaching and the practices being even more explicit of how it relates to um, all of our lives. And the work that's beginning to happen related to eco-awareness, MBSR and eco-awareness, that I know that the Best Family Foundation has been supporting, and Margaret Fletcher and others are taking on. I completely applaud. I think it's really, really important. I'm very excited about that work. And then that work will probably need to be researched or can be researched. And so there's a whole lot going on there. And I just want to say that, when I think about mindfulness, I'm reminded of the Japanese character, the character of Kokoro, same character for mind and heart, same character that in East Asian religions and culture, they're the same. And so as we are taking on a practice and living a life that we want to be mindful, I want to remember that it's about our heart and heartfulness, moment by moment.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think there's generations of work to be done that's sparked by what you've just shared. And I think I agree, really important areas. And I know we're coming up to time, so just really want to, sincerely thank you for joining us today. I think there'll be ripple effects from your talk for weeks, if not months and years. And then, Fran, anything else you want to share in closing as we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan and Eric, also for taking time out of your schedule to facilitate this wonderful conversation. And thank you for everyone who's joined. As we've done in the past, we'll put the recording up on our YouTube playlist. So look for an email in the next couple of days with a link to that. And then I did put in the chat some information about 2 upcoming events that we have. So we'd love to see you there if it works for your schedules as well. So thank you again. Be well, be safe, and keep on connecting with each other.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Fran. Be well.
Yeah, a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.